I feel like when people are just starting out or they don't really know like where to go yet, I feel like people kind of assume, oh, I have to be entertaining or I have to be funny or like, oh, like, nobody wants to learn. They just want to get entertained. And I don't think that's true.
So this or that, educate the feed or entertain the feed.
Educate the feed.
Newsletter or podcast.
Podcast.
Ooh, okay. I love that. Okay. Data-led strategy or like gut or instinct-led strategy.
Instinct-led strategy.
Oh, okay. This is so good. All right. I feel like this one I'm just like leading the horse to water kind of vibes, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Personal brand or company brand?
Personal brand.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Last one. AI assisted content or fully human content?
Ooh, I might catch some strays for this one. I'm going to say AI assisted content.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we can double click into any of these and all of these. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we might need to because
Yeah.
I actually thinking about the double click into any of these. Let's anchor this into what zero click marketing is. I've obviously had a chance to listen to your podcast. People here today have probably listened to it or definitely follow your content. But for all of the sake of having continuity across the feeds and the ears, what is zero click marketing?
So today my explanation is going to change. I will give kind of like a preview story to it. So this was like 4 years ago, before Red and I even knew each other. And I just, I followed him on Twitter because obviously I did. And this was also when Twitter was Twitter and not X. So, and this was also when people actually talked about their expertise and their niche and their hobbies over on Twitter. So this is important to remember. And one day he tweeted something like, I feel like there is an area of marketing that involves, you find your audience's sources of influence. Like you figure out like which podcast they listen to, which YouTube channel they subscribe to, the social accounts they follow. And essentially what you do is like you do marketing there in those channels. And it's focused on meeting people where they are. And it's not so much campaign driven, or it's not like paid ad focused. It's not SEO focused. It's just kind of going to where people are and marketing there. What was interesting was a lot of people chimed in and a lot of the comments were like, oh yeah, this is influencer marketing. And he was like, no, because influencer marketing means reaching out to influencers and having them talk about your product. And yeah, that can be helpful, but that's not really one thing a marketing team can do on their own unless they have tons and tons of money to just spend. Like, no, it's more about like going to the source of influence and like you're also the one posting about it. You're not dependent on someone else to talk about you. Somebody else was like, oh, isn't this just content marketing? Rand was like, not really, because this also involves a focus on social media. Maybe at some point you will have to focus on ads. So it is kind of like it touches all the disciplines. And I was thinking about this tweet the other day, and I didn't respond to it then. And it's only connecting the dots going back. And I sent Rand a voice note, and I was like, wait, I remember this tweet from 5 years ago. I think you were talking about zero-click marketing. And he was like, yeah. He was like, yeah, that's why we're doing this book. I'm like, no, I know. I was just thinking about it. And at the time, Rand was calling it influence marketing, like going to the source of influence, becoming influential, influencing your audience in all the different ways that they consume content. So that's kind of what zero-click marketing is. The reason we need it is because of the way the platforms have not even just enabled, but have kind of forced in-platform behavior. Like everyone knows now, like on the socials, that you basically can't put a link. Even if you physically can put a link, you basically can't, right? Because we all believe that like the algorithms will like crush your reach, or you can't do it, you'll get suppressed. And we've all kind of learned like, well, you have to find other ways to get scrappy and drive people to ultimately drive them to conversion.
So I'm thinking about, we were playing this or that, and I said newsletter versus podcast, and you said podcast.
I did.
What's the zero click marketing for you when you think about podcast?
The way I'm approaching my podcast is I'm trying to give this standalone value in each episode where you don't have to subscribe and listen to each episode in order to understand it or get value. The idea is you listen to one and you go like, cool, got it. I'll come back, you know? But at the same time, I do want to differentiate from general B2B marketing, right? Like I do have a couple of interviews with friends and colleagues, but it's not a show about Amanda talking to people, right? It's a show about Amanda talking to people within the context of zero click marketing.
What about today's environment has shaped the necessity to really embrace zero click marketing?
I think how I feel about AI, LLMs, chat GPT and stuff, it's a little complicated because on one hand, I don't want to be the person who's like, oh yeah, let's go like all AI. Let's do like the AI marketing. Because I don't believe that should be a thing. But at the same time, I'm not going to say that, oh, this doesn't matter. It's just a bubble and it's going to burst and like, who cares? Like, I don't know. Because a couple of realities are market share of AI tools when you compare them within the context of search, especially, is still very low. Like if you're looking at search tools as like, and now I think at this stage of like Google AI overviews and stuff, I think it's fair to kind of like see them as like a nebulous blob, like the AI and search, because there is overlap, especially in the way that people use these tools. I'm not saying it is one for one, it's not, but there is some overlap, right? But overall market share is relatively low. And then even then, when you look at the amount of visits to Chat GPT, what is it like? I don't know, the hundreds of millions. Only about half of those visitors do anything on Chat GPT, meaning like, or actually no, about half of them prompt or search or whatever, interact with the chat. So there are like half of people who are bouncing, right? For whatever reason. Maybe they checked on something they needed to see and they're done. Maybe they didn't know what to do. So I do think it's really important for marketers to keep in mind, like, sure, we do tend to be people who are like at the forefront of this stuff and early adopters, but is that actually where your audience is? Are they paying attention to these things? That's one thing. The other thing I'll say is kind of regardless of that, we are in this era where what people say about you, what third parties say about you is becoming more and more important, for better or for worse. And there are going to be times when your customers, your audience learns about you through the words or language that you didn't even say. They could be Googling you. They could be reading an AI overview, but that AI overview might not even contain what your website says. So it is, so kind of taking that broad view of it, it's really important to be thinking about, am I generally reaching people where they are? Am I speaking their language? Am I influencing them in some way? And I'm not talking like influencer, but I just mean influence in general. And I think kind of an ironic thing with all this is now things like PR, really good content marketing, a good social strategy, these things are all really, really important because all these things provide the ways for third parties to talk about you.
Yeah, it's almost like we have less control of our own narratives.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do we do that? I'm curious, you mentioned, again, I was not building our entire conversation around this or that, but it's sort of happening very organically where I said company brand and personal brand, and you said personal brand. So even in the framing of what you're talking about there of like, you can't always control people are saying about your company brand or whatever, like, why did you put more value on the personal brand today?
I think it's what it really just kind of comes down to is that people would just rather follow other people, not companies. Like they just don't want to. And it doesn't mean that they don't care about your company. It's just that like when you're scrolling in your feed, you don't really want to see companies talking. Like,
Yeah.
like sure, there might be like the Wendy's of social media where you're like, oh, I love it. But my skepticism there, okay, I'm just going to say something very biased and personal, which is fine. This is my opinion. Personally, like, I don't actually follow any of those, like the Wendy's and whatever accounts. And I have nothing against them. It's just, I'm not going to social media to look for McDonald's talking to Burger King. Like, I don't care. Like if something goes viral and I happen to see it because other people are talking about it, sure, I'll check it out. But I don't want that. And maybe the bias here is like, I just I can't really strongly imagine marketing to someone who like deeply cares about that.
So you're kind of living proof of the framework that you're even talking about. I'm curious, leaning into the personal brand versus company brand a little bit further.
Mhm.
One of the fears that we hear a lot of people say from a company perspective is that when they think about investing in their employees and their personal brand, or like giving them an opportunity to get on the mic or whatever, sometimes there's this tension between, well, what will they say? Or will they become an influencer and then want to quit? Like, what do you say to some of that mentality?
I would say, well, what I do think it's really important to have some kind of guardrails for your employees. So it doesn't have to be anything. I mean, it shouldn't be anything super prescriptive, but I think you could have certain approved language, and just by language, like, here's how you want to refer to our products. Like, let's make sure this is just an example because I used to work at Fitbit. It's not a
Mm,
big deal, but like, for instance, most people would say, like, oh, I love my Fitbit, or like, oh, I don't even know the devices now. I have the charge. I love my charge. And it's great. But like, we as Fitbit would say Fitbit tracker, Fitbit device. So that was just like a thing that we had. That was just how we spoke. So you can have that type of terminology, for your employees. And then as far as, like companies worrying about like, what if they quit? I mean, one, it's just going to be like the top 1%, or even smaller than that, top 1% of influencers who would be able to quit their day job and do the influencing full time. It's really hard to do. And it's really hard to do in a way that makes meaningful income. I'm not saying it's not ever. It's just that, like, realistically speaking, and I think anybody here who, you probably know, like, it's not like you get one viral LinkedIn post and you go, "Oh, sick, I can make like 20K a month just from that." Like, no, you probably can't. Like, you could probably get to that point, sure, but it's probably not going to happen very quickly, and it's not going to happen by happenstance.
yeah. Well, and half the time, I don't think people necessarily even want that job anyway. They just
Yeah,
think they do.
yeah.
But I'm curious because I mean, you've had a really interesting journey, and I think it aligns again really nicely to what we asked on the this or that, where I said educate or entertain. You said
Mhm.
educate. What's interesting about that from your own history, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but you went from like what, like 1,000 followers to 100,000 followers
Mhm.
without any like paid media, no like crazy, but you did that by just like educating, by just like delivering the punchline and not gating it, not hiding it, not like burying it. Like, tell me why that's still such a relevant strategy today.
Yeah, I feel like when people are just starting out or they don't really know like where to go yet, I feel like people kind of assume, oh, I have to be entertaining, or I have to be funny, or like, oh, like, nobody wants to learn. They just want to get entertained. And I don't think that's true. I think people do want to be educated. And you don't have to be entertaining to be educational. It's You have to see your audience, right? And I see a comment here in the chat from Adam saying, like, it's hard for me to wrap my head around this because it feels a little bit backwards to not want clicks. So does zero click marketing basically mean we're choosing to be helpful instead of trying to get traffic? So this is a good opportunity for me to provide some education. And that's a really important distinction here. So what I hope Adam's still here. Adam, like, put like an emoji or like something so I know like there's like a floating reaction here, or say something in the chat. I think it's really important to debunk this because it's when I say zero click marketing, I'm not saying don't try to get people to click ever or don't worry
Mhm.
about clicks. What I am saying is that these platforms, social media, even Google, they are trying to keep users in their platforms. So if you are trying to push people off platform, you are already starting at a disadvantage, right? Because we know, again, that a lot of the social networks, they do penalize you for dropping links, right? So if you're thinking, oh yeah, but if I don't put a link, no one's going to click. How am I going to get them to click? The idea is to deliver so much value directly in the feed so that when people are ready to click, they will do so. And finally, The third thing I'll say is don't think about it again as not wanting clicks. Think about it as not being so click dependent, and think about how you can be strategic when driving the click. So I like to talk about this thing called algorithmic capital, or like kind of an algorithmic bank. So what you do is you accrue this sort of algorithmic capital by posting zero click content in your social feeds, right? So like educational standalone value. Maybe you are like a bird enthusiast and you love talking about birds. Maybe some of your posts would be like, hey, did you see that unusual bird in your neighborhood? Did it look like this? Well, turns out there's a really rare kind of species of bird, or like relatively rare. It looks like this. Here's how you'll know it. Here's what it sounds like. So next time you see it, like it's called this type of bird, right? Like that would be a version of standalone value where someone could come across that, the right person, a bird enthusiast, to be like, oh, cool. But it makes sense in that format. It's likely to get some good engagement because it's not taking people off platform. It gives a value right there. Do a couple of those, kind of stack that engagement, build up that algorithmic capital, or build up your algorithmic balance. And then every now and then, and it doesn't have to be super exact, every 5-6 posts or so, I don't know, then you drop a link. After you have these like 5 cute, educational, fun posts about birds, your 5th post can be like, by the way, I actually sell these really cool bird feeders. You can buy them here. And then you could do that, right? Because by that time, you've kind of primed the algorithm enough where it knows to serve your content to the audience. And then people might click on that. So then you go back to your zero click content, standalone value in the post, right? So it's being just more strategic about how you drive people to your site.
I want to kind of wrap up our conversation a little bit. And ultimately, I want to ask you, if you had to leave people with one thing that they needed to start doing, what would it be? Or stop doing? Start or stop doing?
I'm going to say you need to do zero click marketing today. You don't need to ask for permission. One way you can do it is set a 60-day sprint for yourself. That is going to be 8 weeks, right? Pick a platform, figure out like a content strategy. Like, what is the one problem you are going to help your audience solve in the next 60 days? And then find the other people in your ecosystem who are talking about similar problems, engage with them. Go all in on this channel for 60 days. Track success by look at likes, look at impressions, look at the conversations generated. And then at the end of the 60 days, take it to your boss, your team, whatever, and say, look, I think we're making headway here because, and you could even say like average impressions for an account of my size on LinkedIn is probably like 1,000. I have generated twice that,
Yep.
I think there are ways to talk about this. And then also just, hey, throughout all this content creation, I have an idea now. We need to create a playbook for how to solve this problem. Oh, we should work with this one customer on a case study. Let's do a webinar with them, right? Because I promise you, if you focus for 60 days on a well-defined, pretty narrow topic, you are going to find other content opportunities that will make your overall idea more sustainable over time.
Yeah. And as we wrap up, I'll give 2 shameless plugs. One is, if you want to understand zero click marketing more, you should definitely subscribe and listen to your podcast, Zero Click Marketing. And then if you believe in, Amanda, what you just said in terms of like running at something for 60 days, well, we can make it 90. And at Sherry Genius, we have what we call a thought leadership engine process and program for our clients. And it's literally, you record in 90 minutes and we give you 90 days worth of content. So if you want to run at something and talk about it with video, leveraging LinkedIn and the way that we're talking about it, feel free to reach out to us and do that. And we can pause the stream and keep hanging out. But I think this was a ton of value. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for
that's
sharing.
cooler than what I said. 90 days. That's do that. Don't do my idea. Do Rachel's thing.
We'll just take your framework and do it.